Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So, the Canadian Armed Forces released an ad, and it features a woman on it, and I took some screenshots and shared them in the beginning of the video, and it really was interesting to read the comments because some men were pointing out how the picture is pretty much staged, and that a lot of women would buckle under the weight of such a pack, that she's in a power stance, that she doesn't have a magazine in the weapon, and that it just doesn't look really real. And it's a sad piece of propaganda. Another person mentioned the fact she's wearing an engagement ring or / wedding ring, that she could lose a finger, and that she has tattoos. I guess apparently there's some rules about tattoos being that visible in the military because it's an identifying marker, and you'll never be able to really go undercover because, you know, your tattoos have been made known to the public. And what I thought was interesting about it was how many men said that a nation sending women to combat roles is a sign of cultural decay. And then someone had mentioned that Russia, during, I believe, World War II, Russia during some time period had put women in combat roles, but that other nations haven't done that. And then this raised bigger questions in my mind about the whole feminist philosophy of forced equality. So if you're going to demand men die and give women voting rights, you know, that they can send men to die with impunity while they risk nothing and they're just getting their nails done, living their best life, and men are just dying in banker wars, then it's become a very distorted sense of honor and ethics. And there's a piece of me that realizes that I'm more on the tomboy spectrum in terms of I'm more masculine, and I've had to work on being more feminine. I mean, one of the top insults I get is, "You sound like a man." You know, it's like I get trolled a lot for that. So I'm not some Barbie. And there's this split in me that's like, I want women to know how to defend themselves because there are evil women, and you needed to know how to handle business and stand on business. But at the same time, I know what it's like to be attacked by men, and you'd rather go down fighting than just giving up. And there's a piece of you as a parent that would want your daughters to fight to the bitter end and to keep trying, especially with how many women are R-worded. You'd want your daughter to have a fighting chance to run and escape, wrestle her way out, be able to scream for help, use a quick move, know how to handle a firearm or a shank, pepper spray, a taser, whatever she needs, whatever she has access to, in order to be brave enough to defend herself. And I think this stems a lot from, like, if you watch horror films, you'll see the pretty bimbo running and screaming. She trips and falls. She doesn't really fight back, and she gets shanked up by the serial killer. And there's this awareness that many women have, is that if you don't protect your life, don't expect others to. But there's this difficulty of trying to have the balance of not being masculine, but also being feminine, but being strong when you need to be. And I think a lot of modern women struggle with that because as men are wearing skirts and makeup, becoming trans, and are overall just not a very patriarchal lot, they don't have that sense of duty. Like, for example, Islam tells men that they are the providers and caretakers of women, Surah An-Nisa, right? And they are to maintain us, and there's this duty there placed upon the shoulders of Muslim men. And then Muslim women have their duties. But as an American revert, I can speak about, I've been a Muslim now going on 4 or 5 years, but I can speak about what it's like growing up in America, especially in the 90s, with the just hodgepodge of mixed messaging. And my daughters are in, my eldest is in self-defense. The middle child goes and sees, and she copies what she sees. She's still a little lot. But I've had them around self-defense stuff for a while, and I've had a lot of rich, deep conversations about crime, about the dangers of men and women, and we watch true crime together. I let her know, what planet Earth is, but also to maintain femininity and to not be afraid of having a softer side. It's just when you show it and where you show it. I mean, as you know, we're told as Muslim women not to soften our voices with non-mahram men so that they don't get a sickness in their heart. There's supposed to be a firmness in certain contexts and a softness with others. Firmness with men you are forced to work with, respectable though, but softness and sweetness and charm with your husband, right? Although today it seems quite opposite. Charming with your boss, cold and callous cat with your husband. So it's a bit backwards. But it seems to be that because women have really let go of classical archetypes of femininity and we have more whoredom, there seems to be a response to that of, well, I don't want to be part of whoredom, so I guess I have to go towards the masculine route. And the masculine route expresses itself in the Hillary Clinton pantsuit spectrum, but then also bounces to, the Devil Wears Prada, corporate boss, Meryl Streep aspect. And then you get into the Tulsi Gabbards, where you dedicate your life to the military, don't have kids, you push your body to the limit where your fertility goes away, and then you are consistently being around men or joining the MMA, or you kind of go off into that route. And I would also argue that Joe Rogan, he had a huge crush on Ronda Rousey. This was quite public, right? And Ronda Rousey was someone, and Misha Tate and Holly Holm, these were women who sort of normalized being very physical in martial arts, and then also having simps and the archetypes of the Amazonian women, where, like in Futurama, different shows, Xena, Warrior Princess, you get a lot of these Hollywood depictions that don't really match reality with what men and women are capable of. But this created this sort of, Brienne of Tarth getting Jaime Lannister, or at least for a little while before he runs back to Cersei, Arya Stark. So you get these points where it encourages women to enter into physical bouts with men, and that they have a chance of winning. Sure, some will win, but what I worry about with these ads that are shown is women, when you join the military in a combat role, your chances of being R-worded by your own military members, but the enemy, are really high. Men get R-worded, and we saw that with some Is Not Reallys doing it to a Palestinian detainee. It was a very graphic video, but there was a whole report done on it, and you can see how men in prisons young boys who are captured. So many people, unfortunately, through time, that are males have been victims of R-wording as well. So they are not immune. But the point is that women should be warned. You're entering into the game of war. And how masculine are you trying to become? This is really troubling. How far will you go? Are you going to start to take testosterone? And are these recruitment ads pushing women to become trans themselves? As you know, there are women as well who are trying to cosplay as men by taking testosterone, growing beards, cutting off their breasts. You begin to see them create really strange flesh tubes, we'll call it. They take arm tissue and then they roll it into like a skin sausage and stitch it to their area. It's non-functioning. It cannot really be used for intercourse, but they have it there. So you begin to see this sort of mutilation Frankensteinism going on. So you have to kind of wonder, are these military ads that push women to abandon motherhood, abandon femininity, and place them in harm's way and in the just straight bloodbath of war, is that really what's best for women? You have to think about that. And I do think it's time that we have an honest show, gladiatorial games, if not, of women versus men, and the men not holding back, and us not feeling bad for what happens to the women who decide to engage in that. It's time that I think women see the truth, because all my life I was like hitting men in school and boys, and I was really hands-on. But the boys tolerated it, and this gave me a fake sense of strength. And then, little by little, I learned that wasn't true. And I still remember the first time I was really punched by a man, and it broke my back molar, and I spit out my tooth, and I was like, that was like getting a brick to the face. Is much different than getting punched in the face by a woman, which I've been done many times because I was like always street fighting. You know, it's a completely different type of fist. The density of a male knuckle, I mean, it's like. And then I recall when I was wrestling with my husband, he didn't hold back and pinned me, and it was like embarrassing because I thought, oh, I work out and I'm strong, and I mean, to be fair, he is muscular, you know, he's very fit, but it was like he folded me like a lawn chair, and that really does damage to the ego. And you're like, oh well, then your brain goes towards, oh, I have a weapon, and then you think about female cops and how they're faster to discharge on a male suspect because they know they're physically weaker, and this leads to more people being shot who shouldn't have been shot because women panic and they get overpowered by just an average drunk guy or someone on meth, and they can't really handle it. And so this picture for me opened up a flood of emotions, because you want women to know how to defend themselves, to have that tenacity inside of them, but you also have to be careful with what you promote, because it has a huge ripple effect. And we have to really examine where we're pushing men and where we're pushing women. And a lot of ladies in our era, they see classic femininity as weak because they've seen so much abuse by men that they feel like it's not safe to be feminine. So if you think of like the classic film The Color Purple, the main character Celie gets beat on, and she's a good woman, she's a dutiful wife, but she has a hard lot. And then Hoppo, he beats on his wife. So you begin to see different moments in cinematic history where a good woman was beat on, and then this triggers within the mind of the woman, hey, we gotta defend ourselves, we can't rely on men. And when you see the struggle of feminism and the red pill going on, this further compounds the problem, because if you recall when I read the feminist book, The Sexual Revolution, the author, Laurie Penny, said that men are not the protectors and maintainers of women. She laughed at that notion. And so when you have feminists telling male readers that they're not really responsible for women, and that it's misogynistic for them to think that they have a duty to protect women and provide, and that in exchange for that protection there is, a civility expected, the radfems are not really favorable of that. And no matter which way you square it, I would argue that American women are placed within a tough predicament, because not all women, alhamdulillah, they don't want to be part of the Babylonian system where you're either at a P. party or doing OF. They don't want that, so they think that the opposite way they gotta go is towards hypermasculinization, and they gotta be more than just a pretty face. So that creates a conundrum for birth rates, for the female identity, and let's go even deeper. When you see how moms who breastfeed, for example, because I'm nursing my baby, my third baby, you see the dedication it takes. And I also think that for women who could breastfeed but decide not to, and they give their kid formula in the bottle, anyone can feed the kid. So if you notice how the mother's essentiality is removed little by little, she can go to work, a nanny will feed the baby and give them formula. Well, before, the mother has to be there, she has to breastfeed, that's what's best, and that's a full-time commitment, and that's a noble action, it's a sacrifice, so she should be doing that. She doesn't need to be working at Burger King, CVS, or some laptop, email job. Her place is at home. But you see that little by little, the importance of moms is erased in terms of convenience and getting back into the rat race. And so I argue that femininity itself is attacked. And by erasing moms and making everyone else raise the children, the government takes your kid away for so many hours to parent your kid, and people are also calling for the banning of homeschooling more and more. You begin to see how the essentiality of a mom and dad are replaced with public school, and how your child is taking on a new place in life in the American culture, where they're fine at school, they don't need to be with you, and where parents loathe summertime. They want to be at work, they have to be at work, they want to buy more stuff, they don't want to really be minimalists, they want more luxuries, so they want the summers to even be shorter. So what does a kid's childhood become? And it becomes less about being around your parents and having conversations and spending time with them, to being pushed off. So the duty of a mother, her role as this sort of feminine archetype and spiritual magnet, is shadowed, erased, put on the back burner, and you have the military sort of opening up and saying, well, mothers are not as important at home anymore, so come and be cannon fodder. And we know, like China has done military parades where the women are marching in unison. In North Korea, you see women in uniform as well. So you see plenty of countries that are willing to let their women get loaded up like Swiss cheese. But you have to step back for a second as a mom and say, why don't we push for less war? Why don't we push for diplomacy? Why are we encouraging women to go into the military? And what's interesting further is that, for example, when you see IDF propaganda posters, even some Ukrainian ones, if you do some research, they use a very beautiful lady to sort of play Halloween dress-up time. They give her a weapon, and then she's acting really tough, right? And if you compare how Christian women who join the military, like Republican women online, they'll post with their weapons and stuff. This is seen as patriotic, but if a Muslim woman with a niqab on like myself, or a hijab, or a burqa were to post with a weapon, this would be considered terrorism, extremism, fundamentalism. So I also want to make it known that when a Christian woman poses with a 12-barrel shotgun, an AK-47, a Glock, a tank, whatever she's got, this is seen as patriotism, Western values, not masculine. It's sort of fetishized sexually. But if a Muslim woman has an AK slinged across her back and she's in Yemen taking care of her children, this is seen as an extremist who's backwards and a drone should find her. And I just think that this messaging around what women are allowed to have firearms for self-defense and what religions are allowed to have firearms plays another key aspect, another layer on top of this dilemma that so many women are facing with what it means to be a woman. If a man in a dress can call himself a woman, then no longer do we really have the same specialness and reverence for womanhood itself. So the modern condition has caused women to lose their identity. And I used to dress up in Dickies, Ben Davis's, the plaid button-up shirts, have a bandana hanging out in my back pocket, Cortez shoes. It was, I joined a gang when I was 13, was out of it by 18. And I know what it's like to dress more like the East LA cholas than the hyenas. The hyenas are more, they dress like skanks and they get passed around, whereas soldada, someone who is more tomboyish, she has a different role. So I know what it feels like to be more on the masculine spectrum and to kind of really struggle with that identity. But the hadith where it is said that the Prophet, peace be upon him, curses men who dress like women and women who dress like men, the imitation, that really helps me to remember that it's not okay to imitate men. And the female Islamic clothing helps you to remain feminine because it's different than the men's clothing. So if you're in a secular system, you begin to become more masculine. And what's the old grandpa who says filthy schoolboy makes it up? Imran Hussein, I think his name is. He once said that, pants are masculine clothing, that she should be wearing a dress. And I always thought about that, how pants, they really are masculine, even though we have songs about apple-bottom jeans. Christina Aguilera would wear low-rise jeans in the 90s. Another skanky influencer she had her boobs hanging out and did a Levi's ad, and all the Christian men were posting, I'm not going to say her name, but they posted her picture all over X. And these guys are married and Christians, and if you read the Bible, you're not really supposed to be lusting for women that aren't your wife. It's very sinful, but these married Christian men had no problem really openly declaring how they're thirsting for this woman, and then they complain about female degeneracy, yet they're helping a woman do an ad for Levi's who's being degenerate and skanky by utilizing her sexuality as a marketing ploy. So the same women and men who complain about OnlyFans and the rise of porn are pushing a jeans ad where a woman is hypersexualizing herself. And then I saw a thread where it showed other women doing some really scandalous ads in the 90s, that there's just too much sexual tension over these pants commercials. So if you look at how in an atheist system a woman can kind of dress in a way that is more masculine, more butch, and then you look at the Islamic dress code, it's easier to remain in your feminine when you look at the Islamic dress code, right? And so I'm not saying that women shouldn't own firearms. I've been a big proponent of that. Been a big proponent of women being smart enough to know how to use tools of self-defense because it's necessary. Because Earth is a dangerous planet. It will always be dangerous. And for women who survived being R-worded, women who've had to defend their family when there isn't a man around, you want to have some spunk in you. I mean, if I go up to a rat and grab its tail, it's going to turn and bite me. I go to a chicken, I try to take her chick, she's going to scratch me. I go to a pig, I snatch the piglet, the pig is going to bite me. So, if all kinds of animals can try to defend themselves, therefore, like, why wouldn't we think that there would be a reason for an adult female to defend herself? There are some men who rely on women being too shy to fight back, too shy to scream, too shy to run, too timid to grab a shank and slice and dice. So this allows more predators to go about because they don't have the fear of retaliation. And this should be talked about more, but also the wonderful thing that Islam does is that it tells women, don't free mix with men. Have a male chaperone. Okay? These are things that help protect us. But that's not always possible. Sometimes you gotta go out and about by yourself, and sometimes you're not gonna live in the safest of neighborhoods. So due to that, you're at risk no matter what. And since liberals and libertarians, progressives and Democrats say legalize, tax, and regulate all drugs, this would increase drug consumption and circulation within the population, which means there's going to be more mentally ill weirdos, hallucinating, roaming the streets like zombies. And with the defund police movements, this means less police doing a beat there to protect you as a woman. And since firearms are being, like, legal carry permits, concealed carry permits are being reduced daily, we can see that it's becoming harder for women to own tools of self-defense. And with men working all the time, there's less people around to protect. So we can see that women are facing male criminals, male drug addicts, and just a lot of mentally depraved human beings, and they're having to fend for themselves more and more. So women in response to that are often becoming more masculine. I'd argue that with the more dangers in the world, women become more masculine out of survivalist tendencies. So if we want women to be more feminine, I think it's important for women to realize that good men help create more secure environments, which allows the femininity to blossom. Right? You can't have a nice flower garden unless you protect your flower bed. If you just have an unprotected flower bed, people walk through it, people pick the flowers, people, let their dogs take a dump in it, dogs dig in it, goats and deer will eat your flowers. You gotta protect your flower bed and to have a nice garden oftentimes. I mean, even goats will chew the bark off your apple tree, so sometimes you even gotta put a little cage around your tree in order to preserve your orchard. So, if you want femininity to bloom, you have to create a safer environment. And I think that with so much warmongering going on and politicians just smoking cigars, having a grand old time, not engaging in wars themselves, they just point the finger and say, go die. War has become a very easy option. And so to them, it's like, I don't have to risk anything. My kids don't have to go. They'll be relaxing on a beach, their kids, right? But your wife and your daughter should go be cannon fodder. I mean, this is pretty dark. Pretty dark. And so, as our politicians and world leaders in general create a less safer world due to warmongering and bloodthirstiness, this makes it so women can't really be feminine. They have to go into a masculine mode. And with the rise of feminism, we see that the gender expectation upon men to provide for women, and for women to be feminine and be charming and loving to their husbands and be decent mothers, you can see how there's so many different attacks upon what it is to be a woman, on femaleness, on womanhood, on motherhood. And so it's not a surprise that the propagandists for military organizations are deciding to now create ads where women are encouraged to engage in masculine behaviors. And it's not just that they're encouraged to engage in masculine behaviors, but that it's an illusion. So if women could carry the same amount of weight for men, there wouldn't be like a lower bar for women in the military, right? So if women could do exactly what men do, there wouldn't be any need for sexual segregation in sports. So you wouldn't need to kick out the trans from female sports if men and women were really equal and a woman could do whatever a man could do, because they'd be able to win against those men quite easily. And Riley Gaines has been a big crusader against Islam and against the trans, and you can see how there's this dilemma of, okay, Islam protects gender roles, but then these people want to have their secular liberal atheism, and they also want to have their Christian boss babes. So now you're actually helping, when you really look at it on a deeper level, for men to imitate women and for women to go into the military, and you're really blurring the lines of what it means to be feminine, what it means to be part of, motherhood in general, because you've shifted the definitions. I mean, the dictionary, Webster's dictionary, has now changed the definition of women to include the definition of anyone who identifies as one. I remember that news story coming out. So, with that level of confusion where men think that a dress makes them a woman and them wearing lip gloss makes them a woman, or them chopping off their bits and becoming a eunuch and installing silicone bags on their chest, that makes them a woman. Of course there's going to be this ripple effect of women questioning their very identity. But if you want to have women embrace their femininity more, we have to create a safer environment, and women themselves have to speak against this sort of hyper-masculinization. Self-defense isn't masculine in and of itself. Like I said, insects will defend themselves. You try to go to some bugs and try to take off their wing, they're gonna sting you. Go to a praying mantis and put your finger in his face, he's gonna try to get at you. No matter which way you square it, countless creatures will defend themselves when attacked. So there's nothing feminine about just laying down and allowing yourself to be used any way your male predator desires. No. You fight like hell and you try to survive and get to a safer location and survive the ordeal as best you can, and that's common sense. So I think it's important to remember that women training for self-defense protects them against other evil women, against animals, and helps them just to have a sort of security mindset that will help them when a male attacks them. Not every woman will escape male aggression, but they should still try, because it's honorable to try. Women shouldn't be expected to lay down and accept crimes against them, because men are not expected to just lay down and allow someone to take advantage of them, right? So have conversations with your daughters, have conversations with your loved ones. But if we are to, as a Muslim community, make sure that our women are not becoming cannon fodder for banker wars and secular regimes, you have to have conversations around femininity and go to combat against feminism quite often, right? So it's a very large conversation, but let me know what you think about this poster, this ad, what does it make you think of? And what do you think that their agenda is with it? Clearly, the agenda for me, I think, is just getting more and more women into the ranks to be used and disposed of easily. And this is quite dystopian. Quite dystopian. Because if you need women now to go out there and get blown up, you are clearly not waging a war that is ethical, in my opinion. Men matter too. We don't want to just throw away men, right? Because after World War I and World War II, there was a deficit in men, and because polygamy isn't allowed, a lot of women who were unable to get married, and they became prostitutes. And a lot of people starved, and it was a lot of fatherlessness going around. So I think some people might assume that if we don't have women in the military, there'll be too many women alive left behind, and this creates a problem of excess. I'd say legalize Islamic polygamy then, so men can have more than one wife, but I think the secular people rather women be prostitutes than wives, so, you know, they argue to legalize sex work, but not legalize polygamy. So, what are you going to do? It's really quite troubling, nonetheless, but I think as an American revert, it's important for American Muslims to consistently reconnect with their feminine side and understand that you may not be a beauty pageant Barbie, but you don't need to turn into a raging, shredded, ghastly woman who's trying to take a bite out of a man and act like a man, right? So hopefully we can get rid of the delusions. We can have some honest representation of female weakness and male strength in an arena. I think we're already seeing that because of the trans, but I think it's very important now to really just show women that you're able to push men around because they allow it. But when push comes to shove, quite literally, you're gonna lose in the sort of hand-to-hand combat. And some people have shared clips where women who are like bodybuilders are trying to wrestle average-looking young men, and they get, put in their place. And it's quite astonishing sometimes because of how much Hollywood has propagandized us to think that a woman in high heels who's 130 pounds can take down a 200-pound male with some leg kicks. So this doesn't really help either. So remember that the next time someone tells you that women belong in the police force or military or firefighters. And it's important for us to realize that very few women can carry men across their back, carry men off the battlefield, handle the weight of just a regular rucksack. How do they handle, under pressure? These are really important conversations, and it's not misogynistic to talk about that. It's actually, I would argue, misogynistic to expect women to imitate men to such a degree where admitting that we are less strong becomes a sort of dig towards women, when in reality it's a defense of women and it protects the female identity, I'd argue. Let me know what you think. Please like, comment, subscribe, join the blog. Take care. Beautiful, mashallah.